Hello, I'm Gareth Morlais. I used to work for the BBC Capture Wales Cipolwg ar Gymru digital storytelling project, and I'm looking at really how the power shifted from the broadcasters to the people in the time between 2001 and 2008. And I'm also looking at some of the technological developments that happened in that time as well, which would give you some idea of what it was that was driving that change. It all began, if you imagine just before 2001, what we had, if you wanted to make video, you had to have one of those sort of big Sony cassette or even reel-to-reel machines that cost about 20 or 30,000 pounds. And that would get you your video, but then you had to sort of have a way of showing it. And the broadcast license was very difficult to get hold of. So the power was in the hands of the broadcasters, not the people. But something happened in 2001, and it was a technical development, and it was Apple, I would say. It was Apple releasing the G4 Titanium PowerBook in 2001, and suddenly it became a little bit more affordable, and it became possible to edit television on your kitchen table. And that was a revolution. And more things developed. I'm going to look at a couple of other technological developments as well as that. And I'm also going to look at some editorial innovations that I noticed in that time as well. It was maybe me just learning more about storytelling from the people I work with, but I was nevertheless excited by these. So Daniel Meadows was a lecturer in journalism. He was a photographer, a documentary photographer, quite well known for his Photobus project. And he went over to America to make a digital story. And it was at a time when they were sort of like looking at new forms of news. And he went to a workshop run by Joe Lambert and Nina Mellon over at University of Berkeley at the Story Centre, what's now known as the Story Centre. And when he was there, he saw a story by Dana Atchley, Last Exit. And it really sort of affected him because he was like a short form personal style of storytelling where the teller used photos from their own archive to tell a story that could touch millions of people. So he spoke with the head of BBC Wales, Menna Richards, who arranged for him to be seconded over to the BBC. We invited Joe and Nina over to the Elan Valley Hotel in mid Wales to do a training the trainers, and I was one of the ones that attended that, and that was in 2001. And I guess we all sort of had to make a digital story. I'm not going to show a digital story that I made there, but I'm going to show one that I made later, just so it's a tradition. Whenever we were talking about digital stories, we'd show a digital story that we made. So here's one of my digital stories.
Just in time. Mum was dying. I just didn't see it at the time. You know how it is. I just couldn't imagine her not being alive. She'd had several courses of treatment. We'd laughed together when they were harvesting her stem cells about 2 years before this. Now she had pneumonia and leukemia, side effects of the treatment. Tell her, said Gwen. Tell her what? Tell her the things you need to tell her before it's too late. Tell her what? That you love her, and thanks. That's when I clocked what was going on. And that's when I walked from the family room to her bedside, held her hand and said, I don't think I've ever said thanks properly, Mum. You've been great, and I really love you. And we talked. And I'm so glad we had that time together and the chance to say that much. Just in time.
Yes, digital stories are really, I think, powerful. And I'm going to talk about an editorial innovation that really moved me, and that was Gaynor Clifford's story. And what happened was that if you imagine before Gaynor told her story, whenever there was a story about a child dying of cancer on television, it would be with a peg of National Leukemia Week, and they would always have the shots of the mother and father looking sad, leafing through albums, and it was all a bit of a cliche. Gaynor came in with her story, And the opening line was, "What's heaven like, Mum?" Why? I'm going to need to know. And that was her son telling her. And it really moved us all in the team. And we realized that storytelling and this sort of new form of digital storytelling had a really powerful health advocacy thread to it. And that's something that I've been delighted to see exploited and sort of developed over the years. So Gaynor really sort of changed my mind about the power of digital storytelling. And then protest. We traditionally seen protests portrayed on the television from like behind the police lines, looking over the police towards the protesters. But then all of a sudden, Paula made this digital story that was from inside the demo, where you saw the faces of the police, not their backs. And you were seeing the sort of fun that the protesters were having in this particular, what was an anti-war thing around Iraq. And it sort of changed the point of view so that the storyteller wasn't the broadcaster, it was one of the protesters. And that was really quite an innovation for me in storytelling. The next one I want to talk about is a story called Walking with Maurice by Hannah Jones. And this was, for me, an eye-opener. Maybe for people in the audience who are seasoned storytellers, it's nothing new. But Hannah told her story in a way that used swooping. Have a look at this story and see what you think.
I could never really understand why my dad wanted me and my sisters to walk up a mountain only to come back the same way. I would be thinking about each step I was taking, knowing it would be longer and longer to come back. But as I turned 15, I found my perfect walk. And more importantly, I found a soulmate on the way. On one of our first walks through Grana Woods, we decided to carve a H for Hannah into one of the trees, so that even when I was back in Norway, I would still be with him on his daily walk. For 10 years now, Morris and I have walked this circle together. When we enter Grana Woods, we learn something new about life and each other. We take time to walk slowly. This is when we share our thoughts and values and find out how similar we are. Morris is not just my special friend, he's also my granddad. I admire my granddad. I admire his knowledge, the way he looks at life, and the love he shares with my grandma. I love the way he cries when he's sad and when he's happy. I feel so incredibly lucky to have a man like Morris in my life. One day, I know that my granddad will no longer be walking with me. The thought makes me sad. But then I find myself thinking of how he touches so many people in his life with his gentle and wonderful way of being. It comforts me to know that my granddad, my dad, and I all believe that when we die, our spirits live on through memories. What we have shared will always be me. I've made a promise to my granddad that in the future, when I have children, we will come back to Grana Woods, and I'll tell them that when I walked with Morris, we never took the same step twice.
That's one of my favourite BBC Capture Wales digital stories. It's Walking with Maurice by Hannah Jones. And the swoops I was talking about there are in three kinds, really. There are swoops of scale, swoops of emotion, and swoops of time. So with the scale, she starts with a wide shot of Grana Woods, and then she zooms into her and her grandfather carving the letter H into a tree. And that sort of general view to big close-up jolts really catches your breath, and I think it's very effective. The swoop of emotion, I love the way he cries when he's sad and when he's happy. you're sort of swinging from one emotion to the other. And then the swoop of time would be, I made a promise to my granddad that in the future, when I have children, we will come back to Granna Woods. So if you imagine that on a timeline, you're starting with the nowness of her and her grandfather. She's swooping forward to a point in time when her grandfather has died, and she has children, possibly, and she's making that promise good by bringing her children back to where she walked with her grandfather. And these sort of swoops catch my breath and give me sort of like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And I think that was an innovation to me. It might not be to you, but for me, that was an innovation. And then there was a development then in 2005. A little website called YouTube came on the scene. And we suddenly thought, God, well, first thought was, how are they going to afford to carry on storing all of those videos? Because storage was really expensive at the time. And another thing then we thought was, if this takes off, it could really change the balance of power between the broadcaster and the citizen. It could give a lot more say to individual people. So that was a real eye-opener. Because when, our definition of digital stories at BBC Capture Wales, they were 2-minute long pieces using about a dozen or so photos. We used photos then because people had them. People would turn up to workshops with a true print folders, with printed photographs in a carrier bag, and they would use the story circle to develop their ideas and to decide what the story was going to be around. And that workshop thing was really important because people were bouncing ideas off other people, and it wasn't a solitary experience, it was a shared experience. And we got the Californians to thank for that. It was a really American thing, and I'm pleased about it. So YouTube came out, and then mobile phones suddenly developed the skill to be able to film video. And not just film video, because 3G had just come out. So this was 2006, and Nokia released the N93 mobile phone. And suddenly you were able to shoot something on your phone, edit it on your phone, and then upload it onto the internet, onto YouTube or somewhere, from your phone without actually needing Wi-Fi, just using... Sorry, the broom fell. I'm in the kitchen.
This is my favourite part of Cardiff. It's coming to Hamadryad Park to skate with the kids.
Suddenly you were able to just shoot with the camera on your phone, edit with the app on your phone, and then upload to the internet to a site like YouTube, just using the software on the phone and not needing Wi-Fi even. And that to me made storytelling portable. Out in the field, you could tell stories. And it was actually a couple of years later in 2005, or a year later, actually, at the end of 2005, probably just a few months before Capture Wales came to an end, that the iPhone was released. And people, suddenly were making movies with the thing they had in their pocket. Digital storytelling didn't just go on the web. The Capture Wales Cipolog Gymru stories, the Capture Wales stories were shown on BBC Wales television. And that was an added thrill for the storytellers and the pride that they had from having their stories shared by the national broadcaster, and friends coming up to them and validating their stories, telling them how much they'd enjoyed it, was a really important part of it. And I think, 850 or so people told their story with Capture Wales. I'll forever be proud of that stat. And I'm also proud of the fact that when the project was awarded a BAFTA Cymru award, who went up with Daniel Meadows to accept the award but Gaynor Clifford, who told the story about her son dying of cancer. And I just think, there's an innovator deserving to receive that award. And so the innovations, there were some editorial ones, there were some technological ones, but the most important thing is that the fact that the people had more of a voice, and it wasn't just down to the broadcaster to decide whose story was worth telling. Individuals could make that decision for themselves and choose to share their own stories. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I've been Gareth Morlais, and I hope to see you again in real life. Bye-bye, Hwyl.